Welcome to all our participants for our last lecture series within the Planetary Health Academy, and we are pleased to see that you have joined us in such large numbers and that you're going to listen to the last lecture series today. The motto of our series was From Knowledge to Transformative Action, and in the last few weeks we have heard something about the basics of planetary health, and we were listening to various scientists, Professor Rahmstorff, Professor Gabrysch and others, to hear about the basics of climate science and to build some kind of a foundation of knowledge. And then the next section was about communication and the sociological and economic aspects. Harald Lesch, Louise Neubauer, Eckhard von Hirschhausen and Claudia Kempfert were present then. And in the last section, and also today, we were talking about some specific examples of transformative action. Last time, for example, we discussed how a zero-emission hospital could look like, what the planetary health diet is, and why the empowerment of women is so important in this context. And before we start with today's series, we would like to thank you very much indeed as a team for listening, because without you, the whole Academy wouldn't have grown into what it has grown to, because you're a very important part. Your feedback, the questions you've been asking and the activities which you have started really have been shocking positively for us. We used to have the idea that we should start this series, and we were really completely surprised by the number of applicants and registrations and listeners. So also we got excellent feedback, so thank you very much indeed for that. It's been a great motivator for us, and today we would like to shed light on a few of these activities which have been started where transformative action was encouraged. And in the second part, we'd like to close the whole series with a celebratory speech, a keynote speech. Professor Ganten had been asked, who could not come for time reasons, but Professor Rockström will come, who's the scientist who has started the model of planetary boundaries, and Professor Gabrysch will also say a few words. She's brought planetary health to Germany, and you've also seen her in the previous times or sessions. Before we continue, I would like to talk about the future of the Planetary Health Academy now. Some of you are waiting for the participants' certificates, which we're going to send out from the 22nd July to the 30th of July after a brief summer break. And if you feel like sharing this series of lectures with international friends, there is a small group working on having this series translated, so you'll also be able to share it with all English language friends. As in the first time, we're also interested in your feedback and evaluation. I would like to post a link to the chat, and you can give us some feedback about the lecture series, and the link will also be present in the final mail. This will also be important for some of you because you need it in order for this to be accredited from your university. And for all those who don't have enough knowledge still, you can register for a meeting next week, next Wednesday. It's about climate change and health, and you'll find further information of that on the website of the German Alliance for Climate Change and Health. And so much for the organizational things and the future. Maybe there is a second series coming, but we're still doing some brainstorming then, and there's the summer break to consider too. But for the first part now, transformative examples, I would like to start with a quote by Louise Neubauer. She put forward in her session, she said, "We need to realize that our individual contribution to transformation is irreplaceable." And this is going to be our motto for the series of lectures, and also has encouraged people to take action directly. And I would like to pass the floor to one of the most our youngest Health for Future group. So I'd like to move over to Lilith and Juri from Brandenburg. Yes, I'm Juri from Health for Future in Brandenburg. We're a group of medicine students at the University of Brandenburg, a very young university in Brandenburg, and we founded our group inspired by the Planetary Health Academy for individual reasons. In my case, it was the contribution by Louise Neubauer. At our university, there was a working group on tolerance and sustainability, which worked on similar subjects. Lilith is going to talk about that more later on. We set ourselves 3 goals. 1, we want to make sure that planetary health becomes part and parcel of teaching at the university, not just as an option. It should be a mandatory part of the curriculum. 2, we want to attack the subject of zero-emission hospitals in Brandenburg, such as making sure that the university hospitals use ecological anesthetic gases, and the great thing about our university is it's decentralized with various places involved across the federal state of Brandenburg. So if we can make sure that ecological anesthetic gases are used in the university, then this means that we really spread it out across the whole territory of the state of Brandenburg. And we also want to raise the awareness through demonstrations and so on. And Lilith is going to talk to us about the past, what we've done in the past about this, in terms of demonstrations. Yes, hello. We founded our group 2 years ago, and we have organized interesting activities. We have linked forces with existing local organizations, and we implemented certain projects with them. For example, a year ago, we had a climate information day with various presentations, workshops, a bus exhibition, and a regional buffet. And all this is revolving around the subject climate, sustainability and diet. And we've been able to appeal to 100 new, students and citizens who've come to this event and learned a lot, I hope. And the plan is that we'll have further action days and projects, as Juri has already mentioned. So we're very much looking forward to further ideas which you may contribute, and of course we'll be pleased if you made contact with us. You'll find our email address on the Planetary Health website. Thank you. Thank you very much indeed. And of course we are looking forward to cooperating with you in the future. Let's move to a different group now, to Hamburg. Leah and Hannah. They are going to give you an example of how to work with GPs. Hello, we are Hannah and Leah, and we are medical students from Hamburg, and we are active with Health for Future, and we wanted to show you one transformative idea. You will know it from the television. If you want to know about the side effects, you have to look at the package circular and ask your doctor or pharmacist. But we said, if you want to know about the side effects of the climate crisis, please ask your doctor or pharmacist. This is our vision, which we have. The doctor, if they have a GP practice, well, they are practicing there locally. And when we are out in the streets and inform people about the health effects of the climate crisis, we are out in the streets. But we want to create an interface between the two, to combine the GP doctors and us, Health for Future, so that together we can achieve more. And this interface is going to be a non-profit association, supporters of Health for Future in Hamburg. So we want to appeal to doctors and pharmacists and win them over as supporters of our idea. That's why we created this association, non-profit making. We want to engage in a partnership, and we have thought about the following pilot project. The practices will receive information material from us for their employees, but also for patients. This could be then displayed in the waiting rooms. This could be positive publicity for the practice. It doesn't cost much work because we provide it to them, and we also hand in a manual for a green practice. And we expect this to achieve an increase of our reach. Our manual is subjected to a reality check, and we get feedback, and also the members will be sponsors at a cost of €90 per 3 months. Per quarter, we expect this contribution to be made by the doctors and pharmacists. This will be tax-free because we are non-profit making. And we can also expand on our commitment for Health for Future because then we'll have some budget. And we expect that we can actively implement climate protection in pharmacies and in GPs practices. We just went to the Notary Public and have registered our association as a registered society, non-profit making, and hopefully we can implement our vision, and then we'll have the first contact with the model GP or the model pharmacy. And we also hope that patients will get some information finally about the climate crisis. So you can subscribe to our newsletter and check out our other social media platforms. Thank you very much. Thank you, Hannah and Leah. You've shown you can think up some innovative forms of being active and also finding some funding for that. Another local group which has been increased in size by the Planetary Health Academy is the one from Würzburg, and Sophia is going to give us some input there about her group. Hello, I'm Sophia. I'm a medical student in Würzburg, and I would like to tell you something about a public campaign which the local group has organized. We've existed since November, and a month ago we just got involved in the Fridays for Future campaign. They had a rally which was held outside of the city. We observed social distances and we were wearing masks. Various speeches were made, and we also made a speech. We formulated our goals, and we also were more specific about the effects of the climate crisis on health. And in total, on the whole, this was a very positive experience. This was the first white bloc demonstration which we made in Würzburg. And through the academy, in the last 2 months, we have received a lot of influx for the local group. And for the first time, we also met up personally for this white bloc. Before we had Zoom conferences, but this way, this was the first time we really got to know each other, which was very positive. And at this rally, there were individual medical students who were made aware of us and joined us. We also connected with one doctor who was involved in Fridays for Future, and so this gave us some positive feedback in our activism, and it was good to see the activities which are possible in the public space during the lockdown. So we've been very encouraged by this. So much for my personal contribution. I would like to pass over to some activists from Austria who will tell us something about what's emerging there. We had a large group of Austrians who were involved in the Planetary Health Academy. I'd like to pass the floor to you. Well, thank you very much, and best regards from Innsbruck. The others are located in Vienna and Graz. We're quite widespread. We've been around for a long time. Doctors for a Healthy Environment, that group has been around for 30 years. In the 1980s, unfortunately, people grew old together, but there were no young members. And now there is a big breakthrough. We're really so happy to see that young people are becoming engaged. Now we had a vigil week together with the director of the Medical University of Vienna, and we were covered in 25 newspapers. We have now environmental working groups in the Chamber of Doctors, and actually there are some further training points which you can collect if you become involved in this. And we also demand health aspects in the environmental activities, and no one else is doing this in my experience. I would like to pass the floor to Sabine, who is involved with Doctors for Future, who actually created or founded that group. Hello, I'm Sabine. I come from Austria, from Vienna. thank you, Heinz, for the praise about Doctors for Future, but I didn't actually found it. There were other older colleagues from the university, but I tried to stand in for them today. The goal of Doctors for Future has always been to create awareness for the problem of the climate crisis within the group of doctors and also hopefully within the other health professions. And if there is such an awareness already pre-existing, to strengthen this awareness. The number of activists is quite small yet, still, but what we've done so far is becoming involved in demonstrations and strikes during the corona lockdown phase. The more prominent people have been giving interviews, Heinz Peter Hutter or Heinz Fuchsi, for example, and we also have created a Facebook page and a private Facebook group, and hope that this will help us with connecting with other Austrian colleagues. We are still looking for like-minded people, so if someone from Austria is listening and is already active and wants to become active, then please just talk to us and contact one of us. Thank you very much. Mechthild is representing Health for Future. Hello, I'm Mechthild. I come from Graz, and Health for Future Graz has been around since October, and we think it's important to talk to not just doctors but also all health professions. And we have participated in various activities, for example, demonstrations happening before the lockdown, and during the lockdown we also had a Sea of Signs which we held up at the Market Square. We have a Meatless Monday where we want to maybe encourage people to go without meat on Mondays, and also we carried out an action day for climate justice in Graz together with many other climate organizations in Graz. So this was important for local cooperation. So much from my contribution. Okay, I would like to close this. I would like to hold something up there into the camera which says 1002 ppm CO2. Yesterday I made a presentation about heat and other crises, and as Martin always says, we can talk about being human and what moves us, and we can understand the importance of disease. And I heard from some participant, this was the presentation he benefited most from throughout his life. I thought it was a joke, but he was serious about it. So I also talked about resilience, and we can really connect it to the subject. Also, we have a positive message. Yesterday I looked at the table of contents of the climate manual for doctors, with 150 pages. It is going to be printed with 50,000 copies and sent to all doctors in Austria. And I've talked to the boss of the Climate Fund Austria, who was highly interested in getting involved. So we're going to take some time to publish this, and we'll also extract lots of know-how from Germany, so that we can put some great input into it and information into it. Maybe there will be a new edition by the German doctors, publishers too. So if you haven't registered yet and talked to us yet, please use these email addresses and raise the subject. We have been able to publish in various specialized magazines. The subject is really increasing in size and appeal, and I'm so glad that young people are getting involved, and also that's a lot of motivation which is spilling over from Germany to Austria. Thank you, Heinz. You can tell from the examples that these are local points of positive infection which seem to be spreading. It could become an outbreak of positive infection now. I would like to pass the floor to Louise, who's part of the core team who organized everything, and she's going to report about what she's done in terms of connecting people, connecting students groups, and also the formats which are being created. Thank you, Martin. I will just briefly tell you something about our organizational perspective, because this has been a first experience, a first for us. We as Gruppe and as a team have for 1 year been looking at this subject intensely, and the first point that strikes you is that there is no teaching about this, although the topic really covers all the subjects of the medical curriculum. And therefore we came up with the idea of coming up with a lecture series, and in March, April we were told would not be able to become so active because of Corona, and so there was a window of opportunity for online training. Of course, we're not the only ones who came up with this idea, but certainly this is a new format for us, but gave us new opportunities. For example, the people, we can talk to people from all kinds of places, and we can allow them to speak up and also to listen, not just locally but globally, basically. So we had a much bigger reach. Everyone can take a look, not just medical students. And so this has developed into something very exciting for us. Initially, we were very motivated, but we didn't really know where this would lead us. But in the preparation stage, we were very lucky because we had great speakers who were willing to contribute completely voluntarily. And also the fact that the idea of using networking has worked. So we've got great contact persons in all kinds of cities, and exchange with them, cooperation with them has been very pleasant, very uncomplicated, and very inspiring. So it's impressive to see the ideas which have been emerging. So we can only show our respect for the great work which has been done. And next point, we were very happy to see so many registrations. It confirmed us in the belief that we need to do something here. And we are very impressed for the fact that so many people have been watching us, listening to us. We also thought we should be having a Q&A channel, which was a challenge for us to deal with that, and it was amazing to see how many people have been asking questions and how many people have been willing to contribute. This would be the next point. The feedback for us was also very valuable. It's been very revealing for us to tell what's working and what's not so working so well. And so it's great motivation. So your motivation has spilled over to us and has inspired us and given us new drive. So this feeling is really strong of learning together and of sticking together and fighting together. So we're such a big group with the same goal. It's great to see how dynamic everything has developed. For example, that as this subject has been accepted as a subject in teaching on a very short notice. So all these are great signs and indications that things which we wouldn't have been able wouldn't have been able to think possible have become possible. So it's important that we have understood that we should not be someone who asks for a favor, but we are asking for something which is absolutely necessary. And we hope that through Planetary Health Academy we can make a basis for future work. So you don't have to reinvent the wheel. We've got the momentum behind us now. Thank you very much, Louise. And with this, I'll pass the floor to Felix, who has been working with Louise on networking these action groups from the university. He's also the coordinator for Health for Future, and the academy has really made a difference. So it's interesting to find out how he has experienced these 2 months and what kind of development he sees as in the Health for Future community globally. Well, thank you, Martin. As you say, my role is to support the Health for Future network. So I'm not really on the screen very frequently, but I've had lots of contact, but basically with everyone who's been talking on the screen, and also with the existing Health for Future groups. And my impression, I think it's shared by everyone, is that the Planetary Health Academy has been key to the Health for Future movement, and so we have grown in terms of breadth and depth. So in the last 3 weeks, we've had 6 new Health for Future groups in Germany, such as Brandenburg, but also Regensburg, Düsseldorf, Tübingen. And on the other hand, my impression is that together as a movement we can grow by having an exchange between the local groups. We're using synergies for certain projects. Hamburg is one example where something is going on in practices, but also in other places. And we are trying to really pool the resources and pull the forces together, and we've got to know each other much better, and cross-regional projects have emerged, such as, for example, Planetary Health workshops for school students who are now emerging from Munich, Aachen, Berlin, and London. And this connection has also been created through the Planetary Health Academy. And maybe also a personal note at the end, similar to what Louise says. My impression is there is a special culture within Health for Future. Everyone is very mindful of each other. We're supporting each other. We're trying to make sure to find our borders, our limitations mutually, but also we're quite determined in terms of our demands and our commitment. I think this is really special. And I think Health for Future will continue in the future. Currently, we're planning to have a cycle tour, Health for Future. And of course, we want to be present as Health for Future, but also we want to just have a cycle tour together because it's fun. And another project we are planning currently is around a number of workshops under the title Health for Future Skills Academy, where we want to improve the skills which are necessary for our work. For example, from the point of view of political communication, but also mindfulness for ourselves and others. And for those of you who are not part of Health for Future, please turn to the contact persons in your local groups. Just register in the Health for Future newsletter. There will be a link in the chat, and also write off to us directly. Please, don't hesitate. Thank you, Felix. I will carry on with a subject which I would like to summarize under the title of communication. Johan will show you how you can use any communication channels and not just the usual channels. Thank you very much, Sylvia. It's really fitting with the last subject. I would like to show you a project which enables us to be to remain connected. It's a podcast which we have set up recently. It's called Klimavisite. So it's a visiting rounds of the doctors in the hospital, but this time is about climate. It starts starting from Hamburg, but of course it can be heard across Germany. And these are existing podcast platforms in Germany, but the problem there is that there is not much content to be found about us. Certainly about climate protection, but not about climate protection and health protection. And so the goal was to put health and climate protection onto these platforms. So Leonhard, Laura, and myself have started to just develop such a podcast. These are pictures of the first recording, which didn't make it into the first podcast, but that's where we started from. An initiative has been created, and just recently we've published a podcast, and we're going to keep going with that. The format I'd like to introduce. The podcast will revolve around 3 subjects. First of all, introducing studies about the subject, then interviews with experts, and also projects such as those which we already heard. We'd like to put this into the podcast. And in terms of the format, one person from the podcast team will pick some content, will record an interview, for example, or looks at the study and researches into the study, and then there will be a team for each podcast episode discussing what is going to come. Then the content block, this interview, will be replayed, and then there is discussion about it, and that's the end of the podcast episode. And we want to put this on podcast platforms every fortnight. So every good presentation ends with an appeal, and the first appeal is to get involved. I'm saying it's a Hamburg-based podcast, but we are open to other places. We also want to grow into other local groups, and we want to grow in general. We're very open for cross-regional subjects. We want to improve our reach, extend our reach in the German-speaking area, and of course we rely on suggested issues. Of course, this is where we can contact us, and the other aspect is listen to us, and We are represented on all the podcast platforms we could think of, and for Spotify, for example, you can also follow us. So far, we only have one episode in that, but now we've got a concept where we think that we can produce this on an ongoing basis. We are growing, we are learning. Our sound is going to be better. Hopefully, we've been improving on that, and hopefully we can keep up this fortnightly rhythm or intervals, and so we're looking forward to you listening to us. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Johan. And with this, I would like to pass the floor to Lutz. Lutz, you're founding member of the German Alliance for Climate Change and Health, and you've been around for a long time. You've been working on our campaign style. I'd like to pass the floor to you. Thank you, Sylvia. Demonstrations, strikes, vigils, everything started with participation in Fridays for Future, who inspired us a lot. This is a typical picture. And some bigger attention and also the breakthrough was achieved after the foundation of KLUG with vigils. So I'd like to report about campaigns which have really determined me, they really influenced me a lot, also for Fridays for Future. In November 18, we built up a big tent as an intensive care station in front of Charité Hospital, and for 4 days and 4 nights in November, we're looking after the seriously ill patient Earth in 8-hour shifts round the clock. Doctors and carers cared for this patient who was running a fever, and this was of course difficult for me to stand in the street in a white coat and sit in the tent. But the success of the campaign was good. People really noticed us. They came to us, and there were very intense and very touching and moving conversations. And then in May 2019, we had a great campaign in front of the German Conference of Doctors in Münster, where obviously it wasn't just passers-by who came by, but delegates to the German Conference of Doctors, including the board and Minister Spahn. And together with successful applications in this parliament to address climate change and health, and to make it a subject or made it an item on the agenda for the next conference. This was the breakthrough amongst the doctors. And this was a vigil also in Berlin, an intensive care ward. There were great contacts with passers-by, but also with politicians, because it was Berlin. And in part, some of these contacts are still alive, and they are also important. Here, for example, this is a member of parliament who was also responsible in the Environment Committee. We also had some good success in other things, such as going to the public transport stations, tube stations, and so on, and making these vigils. The metaphor of the Earth running a fever is still very much alive, and we increase our effect to the inside and to the outside, and the world out there, and I think everyone should really participate. We have picked various formats. Some of them have been more successful, some of them less. They may be big or small formats. Sometimes we go on an experiment, such as this is a light installation on the right-hand side, a light projection to the hospital Charité in Berlin. Of course, the subject is very serious, but these campaigns are also fun, and they must be fun, and they create a sense of community. Well, I feel that quite clearly. So doing something together changed me. The link to the idea of climate change has become more intense, because when you're on your own, it is very difficult to stomach everything. But if you are in contact with the like-minded people, then you can keep your confidence up. This is the picture of the last demonstration outside Alexanderplatz in Berlin, a new format called Burning for Future. It is an umbrella organization of different activists. Thank you very much, Lutz. So getting connected with like-minded people is something which is fitting to the next speaker, who is Stefanie, who was also part of the founding meeting of the association, and also you're active in working group of critical doctors, and you've got your style, your separate style. I would like to hear more of you. Hello, thank you very much for your invitation. I'm very pleased. I'm Stephanie, and I'd like to introduce the action group Healthy Climate. From the action group Critical Doctors. Our Earth wasn't running a fever, but it was completely covered in coal dust. And you can see that we are really voicing our solidarity with people fighting in a forest which is about to be cleared because of lignite mining. So there is a link between coal and health, and we have created a position paper on that basis. And both the health organizations and environmental organizations have supported us strongly. What was also important for us was to bring citizens' campaigns into the fold, and we celebrated this position paper and the fact that we got so much backup from all kinds of quarters through this one action day at the World Health Day 2018 in the form of a die-in, and so we put everything on the street there. And you can see that in this way also via the position paper we got a great press coverage. The Ärzteblatt, the German doctors magazine, has reported about this. And so by workshops, statements we gave, articles we published with different addressees, we have kept trying to increase our connection and to tear down knowledge hierarchies and to highlight the link between health and climate, which is often ignored. And in this way we also had the first conference on health and climate at the climate camp in Rhineland in 2019, and one highlight was that we had a civil disobedience campaign which we supported with our demonstration, and health workers from the region were invited for them to be able to report about the health effects of mining. So we went to the edge of the mining area there for lignite. And there is a new campaign now called Divestment in the Health System. So please write off to us if something strikes you there, if you have questions, or if you can help you. We can help you in any way. Take a look at our page. We are distributed all across Germany, and we're looking forward to your feedback. Thank you, Stephanie. That's great. Nice to see that you have creating a lot of things. I would like to pass to Marlene and Nikolaus, who have a different approach altogether. They are going to talk about a survey or questionnaire to practices, and they're trying to bring our topic into the world of the general practices. It's parallel with the Hamburg approach, but it's a different perspective. So I think we'll have a video with Felix, which Felix will play to us. I'm Marlene Turner, and I'm studying medicine in Tübingen. I'm Nikolaus Metzger, and I study medicine in Leipzig. We asked ourselves how the German outpatient health system can make a relevant contribution to health protection and climate protection, and is there any willingness. And that's why we're going to have a survey, an online questionnaire, a research, where the topic is that we are going to go out to GPs and other outpatient doctors and ask them whether they are willing to do climate protection in their practices, working with their patients and addressing the subject of planetary health. So what would happen if all the outpatient doctors in Germany were to use green electricity, for example, or switching to recycled paper? What would happen if they could turn down the heating over the weekends, and if there is a coordinator in every practice who looks after electricity saving and saving of unnecessary waste? And if the doctors and also the other workers in the practices were encouraged to take the bicycles to work, and also the patients going to work by bicycle. Those are the questions we're going to ask the practices. What do people, what is their outlook? What do they want? Are they willing to do that? We want to create a database about ideas, about barriers, about maybe a stumbling blocks because doctors really come in contact with everyone and they have a multiplier function. Apart from the questionnaire, we also want to carry out interviews to raise qualitative data. We want to tease out whether there is a trend for transformation on the part of these practices. So we want to talk to these colleagues directly and gather evidence for discussion and do more public work, more work, PR work really for climate protection. So we are continuing to work on this questionnaire and improve this questionnaire. We'll send it over to 10,000 practices in Germany. And so we're looking forward to their whether they will respond at all and what they will answer. And the goal is that we want to present the results of this in May 2021 at the German Conference of Doctors, because that conference will focus on the idea of climate change and health. And this can be a platform for information and for transformation, I'm sorry. Well, transformation, that was a big term which I found difficult to understand. And when I managed to understand it, I asked myself what I can do as a student of medicine. So I came up with the idea of this questionnaire, and I just jotted down a few questions and sent them off to some people. And the response was, well, that's a good idea. Maybe you can work some more on that. And then I put this idea forward to some online meetings of Health for Future groups. And I'm also, well, I'm at the end of my medical studies now, and my idea was very similar. It was about waste in practices. So we two of us really were working simultaneously without knowing each other, but there was a working platform of Health for Future where we got to know each other. And so then we requested for some funding, and we made lots of phone calls, wrote emails in order to gather support. And now the next topic is some methodical details. What are the questions we're going to ask in these qualitative interviews, and about formalities, for example, the request application to the ethics committee, and how to best advertise our idea. That's something we're working on, how to spread the word, and we can use your support, of course, in this respect. So thank you very much for your attention. Fantastic, thank you very much. Another example and a different approach, which will be pushed, or has been pushed in the last few weeks by Christian Schreiber from Health for Future Bremen. Well, this is a completely different topic. Divestment is the topic we are pushing here in the Bremen Health for Future group. There has been a lot of preliminary work by many other people, also in the media. The link between climate protection and finance, that's a clear link there. And what does divestment mean? Well, from medical ethics alone, it is obvious that we have to exit from oil, coal and gas, and we have to enter renewables and recycling. And why is that important? Because the financial sector is a social tipping element. As Ilona Otto says, we want to make sure that there will be no option in future left but to invest in climate protection. And the German doctors have, for traditional reasons, control over their pensions, and they have invested 100 billion euros over the years. And the question is why it is why it isn't long since been invested in climate protection investments. Of course, doctors pay their contributions, but they don't have to worry about things. The topic is quite complicated and also sometimes boring. And doing a straw poll, asking colleagues about divestment, and the question obviously is, will they get a proper return? Because the dirty investments, they believe, pays more. We are living in a small federal state, which is not very significant for Germany, but we are surrounded by a bigger one, and we are spending about 1 billion per year for, that there's 1 billion in the pension fund, doctor's pension fund, and so we have a parliament of Bremen doctors. Of course, we know each other because it's a small place and a small number of people, but doctors think that they can determine themselves where their money should be invested. And we are given a very clear inputs. We said this input shouldn't be more than 1 page, a short paper with the arguments about ethics. From medical ethics point of view, it shouldn't be acceptable to invest elsewhere. It pays off better than coal and oil, and also it has to happen anyway because the EU has come up with these standards. So therefore, we should be really in the lead of this effort as doctors in Bremen. The first success was quite quick. We have been working on this for 3 or 4 months, and the board has been extremely open about this. So the topic is going to be on the agenda of the next Doctors' Parliament in November, so we can draft our demands. They should be maximum demands, and they will be about transparency of the investments, quite strict criteria, and these criteria should be in the statutes of Bremen doctors. And then, of course, we're going to pass this ball on to other federal states, such as Lower Saxony, and also other professions. So what is helpful? It is helpful to find out who is competent. Can we just address the board of the doctor's chamber? Because openness doesn't mean to say that something will happen. And KLUG, of course, can also be consulted. And what else is helpful? Well, it's helpful if it's fun. And if you think about planetary health, you have to think about your own health too. And you should cooperate with your friends and colleagues. So is there someone in Lower Saxony in the pension fund, they can address us with their questions. Fantastic, Christian, and you've done that in the last 2 months only. That's incredible, and it's a great example of where you say we are small, but we are pioneers, and we set the pace for the others. So great. I'd like to pass the floor to Theresa and Leah from Aachen. They will tell us something about what they are doing together with other climate groups locally, and how they set the political agenda. Leah, Theresa from Aachen. Hello, we are Theresa and Leah. Theresa went on a cycle demonstration in Aachen, and she made a speech to 700 participants exactly 1 year after we took to the streets for the first time at all. And then there was a lot of positive feedback, which showed us once again how important and how underestimated the health perspective is in the climate debate, be it the transport transition or participation, involvement. We need to change our mindset in order to face up to the climate crisis. And by going out to the street, we are creating an awareness for a topic, but that's not all of it. As Health for Future in Aachen, we participated in the cycle demo, which is a national initiative to improve the cycle path infrastructure, and we've pedaled hundreds of kilometers. It's not just a campaign for infrastructure, which is good for health. We also talk about this in local politics and local parliaments. For example, there is a petition for a no-traffic area just outside the university, and also we are engaged in the climate dialogue with the Aachen population. It's not just in transport, also when it comes to urban planning, we are cooperating. For example, we are cooperating about a redesign of an inner city neighborhood called Büchel, and we have tabled a concept for a space for encounter. We want to have more possibility for encounter between citizens. We want to create spaces for self-development and regeneration, which is essential for the psychological health in a world which is full of crises, as it is at the moment. We can only achieve transformation together, and that's why we also contribute to transdisciplinary groups. There is the Round Table Aachen, and we're working for sustainable university, which can be a role model for the whole of the city. And the climate emergency shouldn't just be an empty word. So we also appeal to local politicians, because there are going to be local elections in the autumn. And together with other actors, we are formulating concrete demands for a city worth living in. And for all these campaigns, we notice again and again it's important for us. We are needed as spokespeople for Planetary Health. And so it's always fun to continue. Thank you very much, Leah and Theresa from Aachen. Okay, now we come to the last contributions to this round. Laura, you only joined us yesterday, and you are a nurse and a group of people who are underrepresented in our working group, in our initiative, but you are certain to make a contribution to that, Laura. It's up to you. Thank you, and good evening to everyone, and thank you very much for this incredible opportunity to speak to you today. I'm Laura, and since November last year, I'm working in the hospital in Berlin as a climate manager. So I'm an intensive care nurse and have been for a number of years now. But my eye-opening experience happened 3 years ago when my son was born. I read an environmental magazine, and I couldn't believe that there are still harmful substances in baby care products. So ever since, I have changed everything in my private life in favor of sustainable things. And I'm so happy as to be working in a hospital which has been working for climate protection for many years now. And my activity as a climate manager, well, what it means is that I'm working normally as a nurse on the intensive care unit, but 1 day a week I dedicate myself completely to climate protection. And so I represent the carers in this lecture series. I'd like to talk about the specific abilities and skills of nurses. So we are used to act quickly in emergency situations. We are able to take quick decisions and take measures accordingly. Laura, unfortunately, your sound is no good. Could you switch off your camera, and then maybe it gets better? Is that possible? Because the line doesn't seem to be good enough. Has this improved now? Well, I don't think it was the microphone, but we'll try just the same. Okay. So I'm acting in a big network of carers and therapists, and I'm also working with the families of the patients, and I'm working for the interests of my patients, and sometimes I have to stick my neck out a lot, be it within the hierarchical structures of the hospital, or be it when talking to the family of patients. And also I find that I'm constantly translating things, complicated matter, into understandable German, and especially when patients look at me after the doctors have done their rounds, and then the patients ask me what the decision has been. But carers really are in contact with all structures of the hospital, which is a huge advantage when it comes to triggering transformative processes. And finally, well, when I talk to other people about my job, then people will say, I couldn't do that. And it's the same in climate protection. People who, even though they are willing or understand the fact that the situation is difficult, they still think they couldn't handle it because they would be out of their depth. But I can deal with it, and even if it's difficult, sometimes it's okay to get started, and in the end you find it wasn't so bad. So thank you very much to the Planetary Health Academy. You've encouraged me a lot to continue along these ways. Along these lines, everyone can make a difference. Thank you very much. Thank you very much to Lara and all others. Well, I'm really blown over by what has been seen in terms of reactions. And it's a great example to see how everyone who's made a contribution, many thousands out there, individually in their context, are looking around where they can become active. And then they simply get started. As Lara said, it's like in the pool. You just jump into the deep end. And then you learn. Maybe you'll be on your own initially, and then you're in a group. But the principle in the network is that everyone should be individual, but also very connected. The other principle is to go into depth, understanding more, and also going into breadth, and taking the challenges in front of us seriously, not to be fazed by the fact that the topics are very big and the likelihood of our success or failure, but really become creative and improvise. Sometimes I saying transformation is like jazz. You need improvisation, fun, but also the development of your instrument, getting better every time, better at playing together also, but also finding new creative forms. And also you've seen the connection of the work with the chambers of doctors, for example, in the divestment example, and also in the example of the general practices. So it's a very diverse field of action, and the ability of our network to connect these different dimensions. Sometimes it's the same people, they do some activity, but next day they don a suit and they make a perfect presentation to a parliament of doctors. So you can see that the examples we've seen can be spread to other places. So we're seeing the example of infection, where we're having a non-linear expansion, and we shouldn't lose sight of the fact that the health sector, the health dimension, has been ignored very much in this discussion. Just remember Nick in his second presentation, who said that we can play an important role as a health sector, getting the ball rolling, becoming a tipping element. And we could say with Dirk Messmer of last time that we can really increase the concurrence of multiple changes. So we should keep aside of this. Even though we are lots of people, we should still try and connect with everyone. And there are many other groups. The big job is to find more and more players who play along, but it's very encouraging to see what is possible in 2 months, and with everyone who joins the group, there is more depth and breadth, and still we have a common stance. We are positive, we are mindful, but also bold and willing to go where we didn't want to go in the past. And maybe we should also remember Louisa Neubauer's contribution, who said it's important to realize that every one of us is irreplaceable. No one else can do our job. People in commissions, people in science groups can't do it. We need to have a diverse network. Everyone should be invited to join, and everyone can become politically effective. And the examples you're showing of political effectiveness, starting small but spreading out. And that's an important point. We should feel the encouragement between each other, and we should also realize that maybe sometimes you get stuck, but then you have a discussion with someone else, and then you see a way out and a way forward. I have put down a few ideas and tried to pass some on these ideas if I can find them. Just maybe to remind you that big transformations emerge based on millions of micro-transformations. Everyone can be a nucleus, can be a spice, can have a catalytic function, and it's very important to realize that you cannot predict which story touches someone so much that they change their lives. We've heard a presentation yesterday where one said to him, "You made a presentation to me, and this has really changed me. This has moved me enormously, more than ever before." We've got lots of examples of how to personalize things, how to make it clear that this is a topic for now, that this danger is immediate. It can get worse, but together we have the chance to do something about it in the next maybe 18 months or 2 or 3 or 4 years. We can all contribute to positive change. Let me end this part with a phrase by a French writer from the 19th century who said, "There is nothing more powerful than an idea whose time has come," and we can feel this for the last weeks. I think the time for our ideas has come, and it's now the time to spread this out. Marlene, for example, decided that she should take a break now for 1 semester in order to become engaged in our activity. So how can you find space for yourselves, find time, so that this existential topic comes to the fore, so that we can make a contribution to this existential topic. Same as myself, I have paused my career for a while because I feel the time has come to do something now. And sometimes people are completely absorbed by their profession. Laura is an example. She's a climate manager. She's working at the intensive care unit, and wherever she sees a chance, she can be bold and contribute something, knowing that she can take the lead in her hospital. It's not up to the chief doctors or the doctors. Everyone can take the lead, and we should know this. And if we then pass on to the part of celebration, well, we should recognize that we are the change agents, we are the team, we are all part of a big team, and we are the network which create the links short and immediate and is bold. And I'm very enthusiastic, personally moved by what has happened with you in the last 2 months. I'm very grateful for that, and this gives me a lot of strength to tackle the next big topic. And with this, I would like to pass the floor to Sylvia, who is going to introduce the last part, which is the graduation ceremony, basically, and the final section. Well, thank you very much, Martin. Would like to come back to you. You're all in front of your screens and listening. And what you can do now is take your phones or open a tab in your computer, because we'd like to know what you have taken away from this session. What does the Planetary Health Academy mean to you? Just go to www.menti.com and use this 6-digit code, and then you have 2 fields into which you can write a word of what the Planetary Health Academy means to you, or what you take away from this lecture series, and we'll give you a minute or 90 seconds, and then we'll see what is going to come up. And you can then see the words which are used, such as paradigm shift, So you can see the bigger the word, the more frequent the word also. And so I think we can see a lot of motivation, inspiration, but also other interesting words, enthusiasm. So we're looking forward. We're really glad about the fact that you have accompanied us for 8 weeks, and maybe also will accompany us for the second edition. If there is one, there's more words to come, but I think hope, motivation, responsibility, action, connection are quite prominent words. Martin, I'd like to pass the floor back to you, and we are glad to start the graduation ceremony now, basically. Well, this was nice to have a short break because we've gone through many examples. Individually, they would have warranted spending more time on them because every example has lots of detail behind it. People are very committed with their team spirit and their energy. The last part is now celebration, celebrating what we have achieved together, and many of you will receive the certificate who've been around for 7 times. But what's more important than that is the recognition we give each other, and also the fact that we are irreplaceable, that we are the responsible persons who can make a difference, but we can do it together, not as individual heroes, as lone fighters. We should also live what we preach, and it can be something positive and fun. Many of the contacts we've made are very enriching on a personal level, but this doesn't mean that everyone is committed and everyone is also realizing the big challenges we are dealing with.
And I'm changing to English. I'm very, very happy, Johan, that you are here, because I couldn't imagine a better person to close this. I know that you have been together with others introducing the concept of planetary boundaries. I know you are welcoming Sabine in your team. You are very open to the relevance of the framing of planetary health. So I think you understand very well what contribution can come from our professional group. Whenever I've seen things from you, and I've once seen a live talk, I feel your deep dedication to this work and your immense contribution to this. So I'm very happy to now have you as our special guest for closing this unique first of Planetary Health lecture series. Johan, over to you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much, Martin, and hello everyone. And it's been an honor, and I really learned a lot the last hour following all the presentations. Congratulations to all of you, and I got a very nice briefing from Martin on the great lectures you've had and all the dialogues you've had. So I think the Planetary Health Academy is a real success. And actually, just a few hours ago, I had a deep discussion on research collaboration with Andy Heinz, whom many of you know, who led the Planetary Health Commission for the Lancet Journal, and also sending his regards. And let me start actually in the end of my little short kind of scientific positioning of where I see us heading right now. And just to say that I think you, as participants of the Planetary Health Academy, are sitting right at the heart of the pathway to a solution. I mean, we have to be quite self-critical and honest, coming from climate science, coming like I do from environmental sciences originally. spending my whole professional career on defending environmental values and sustainability. And we have to admit that we have not made the progress at the pace of transformations, as Martin has been emphasizing so eloquently, and that we have to change the narrative. And the narrative is changing in the sense that sustainability is increasingly proven to be a pathway towards success and development and equity. But I'm absolutely convinced that you are sitting on the actual pivotal key, namely the connection to health. That health is the vector to transformative change towards a sustainable future. And looking just at your presentations here, with the repeated message that Klimaschutz is Gesundheitsschutz, and the doctors for future manifestations. And I must say, Lutz Brugman, the way you demonstrated having the planet as a patient in intensive care, let me just share with you an anecdote that was exactly the inspiration that took me to the planetary boundary framework, because I was sitting at the World Economic Forum, I was sitting around tables negotiating about how we can improve governance of the planet, recognizing that there's one player missing around the table, and that is Mother Earth. Mother Earth is never sitting physically with us around the table. So the idea was visually to have the planet be the table, and then have us humans as stakeholders representing different sectors negotiating how to govern the global commons within a stable and resilient Earth system. That was the visual entry point that then became the spider diagram that you may have seen on the planetary boundaries. So I think you're sitting on very much of the intellectual and the narrative that can reach the heart and the brain of citizens around the world. I really am convinced that for us to transition towards a stable Earth system in the future, we can no longer argue this from environmental perspective. We have to do it from security, from health, from peace, and from better living conditions for all citizens. And you're sitting with a key part of that. Then let me just repeat a few elements that I'm sure that you have covered. I mean, I think that the number one issue for me in the entry point for Planetary Health Academy is that we're in the midst of a pandemic, and that this pandemic is not a black swan, which you know better than anyone. It's a manifestation of the interconnected crisis of the Anthropocene. The Anthropocene, the geological epoch we've entered as us humans being the dominant force of change on Earth. And I think this is the drama, that 6 months before the first cases in Wuhan were reported, we had a heads of state dialogue at the General Assembly of the United Nations with the scientific community to put on the table the scientific justifications for declaring a state of planetary emergency. Now, that state of planetary emergency position was put on the table based on the latest planetary boundary science, the latest hothouse Earth publication, the Heinz analysis that we came out with in 2018, which put on the table the evidence that if we transgress the planetary boundary on climate, we may be triggering other feedbacks in the biosphere because of the erosion of the biodiversity, the land and the water and the other living parts of the planetary boundaries. But that was followed, as you may be aware, which you, Martin, were kind of referring to, just a few months into 2019, we published a 10-year, let's say, update of the tipping elements science that were published the first time in 2008, led by Tim Lenton and John Schellenhuber and colleagues at the Potsdam Institute, showing that 9 out of 15 known tipping elements are starting to behave in a very worrying way. They are moving in a dangerous direction, like the slowdown of the Gulf Stream, like the erosion of carbon uptake capacity in the Amazon, like the accelerated melt of the West Antarctic ice shelf. These tipping elements, we know, are connected through teleconnections and regulate the state of the Earth system. Now, this was the basis for considering declaring a state of planetary emergency. And it's coming before we entered the COVID crisis. And the COVID crisis, which you have been discussing through this Planetary Health Academy, is interconnected between an ecological crisis, a climate crisis, and a health crisis. So again, I think you are, through this academy, very well equipped to address that agenda of transformation. I just want to make a reference also to the rising planetary systemic risk landscape, which is something where you come as a central point as well. So it's not only that we have climate impacts, ecological impacts, and health impacts. I find it very worrying to see how the desert locust invasions, probably amplified by global warming in Kenya, today interacting with water scarcity and droughts, hitting on vulnerable communities without public health care and malnutrition, leading to food riots and impossible constellations for social distancing, and becoming kind of pockets of perfect storms that can just make us lose many years of development investments to deliver on the SDGs and quite frankly, human dignity. So we have to be very careful on these local to regional interactions between climate, food, and health in particular. And that takes me to the other parts of planetary health, which I find to be perhaps a critical connection point for you as you exit the Planetary Health Academy. So a year back, we finished the Eat Lancet Commission, where we for the first time brought the health community, the food community, and sustainability community to define a planetary health diet. So what can science say as a universal boundary conditions for food that enables us to be healthy and contribute towards planetary health? So I just want to send this with you, that once you come so well equipped through the Planetary Health Academy, consider also that food is fundamental in this, almost like a troika. Health, food, and climate are positions of planetary health in an integrated systems transformation. And let me then just close on transformations, because I know that you've been discussing this quite a lot. And just to say that super year 2020 has, of course, become a pause year 2020. Is this a concern? Well, I would argue that it's not something we should be too depressed about. I think we have a situation where COVID-19 has basically pushed the super year 2020 into 2021. We've given like a pause year because the global emissions are reducing this year just because of the slowdown of the economy. This is not a desirable outcome. This is not the pathway we desire to be able to return to a safe space on Earth, but it's happening. And next year will be fundamental in rising out of the COVID-19 crisis, living in this virtual world, filling up all our energy and inspiration and the Hoffnung, as was in this final keyword storm as you had right now, to be able to rise and really start acting together in a much more decisive way than earlier. So it's so important now that we do not allow the whole corona crisis to be a slowdown on the momentum. Do we know how to succeed in this transformation? Well, the answer is actually, unfortunately, no. We don't have the levers very clear in front of us of how can we scale and accelerate transformations towards a healthy, sustainable, decarbonized future. But we have enough evidence of some pieces of the puzzle. And yesterday, if you haven't had a look at it, there is, right as we speak, the high-level political forum in the United Nations. So every year there is the high-level political forum in the UN. It's of course virtual this year, but the World in 2050, a large partnership of researchers around the world, some of you may be part of it, presented its third report, and it's all about transformations and innovations to sustainability, identifying levers of change that we can pull, both financially, technologically, education-wise. I won't go through the details there, but I'm just pointing you to that report if you're interested. The World in 2050, just Google that and you'll find it. And let me just close with a little bit of a provocative statement, which is that COVID-19 is, of course, a disaster. It's a disaster health-wise, it's a disaster socially and economically. But it's incredible how we were able to rise and to act on this crisis. And I'm sure you've been discussing this through the Academy. We've put $11 trillion on the table in stimulus packages for recovery after COVID-19. This is extraordinary. It just proves that money is not the issue. And I would argue that from now on, from this very day on, it can no longer be allowed to have any debates anymore among political leaders to fight over whether we can fill the Global Climate Fund with 100 billion euros, or whether we can pay our fees to the United Nations 1% promise for development cooperation, because these numbers are peanuts compared to the trillions that we're able to mobilize to rise after this health crisis. So perhaps we're tidying up a bit and getting the right perspectives on transformation, that we are truly interconnected as a global community. We truly have turbulence, we truly have crisis, and that this crisis is a health, social, economic, and sustainable crisis, and that we need to transform, just as you've been discussing. So I think there's something good coming out of this crisis, and I hope those lessons are well anchored. You have clearly learned them. There's no doubt there. So be the great ambassadors you are and continue the great work. Thank you very much. And back to you, Martin.
Johan, thank you very much for your contribution. So now it's my privilege to give the word to Sabine. Sabine has been a founding member of KLUG, and it's unbelievable if I look back, so not yet 3 years, how much and how deep you have contributed to our own development. It is very clear for me and everyone else that without you, we would not be where we are. We would not have a Planetary Health Academy, because you are the one who brought through your first lectures on planetary health the idea and the framing to a larger audience. And from the first lecture, which I had the pleasure to introduce you to, it was very clear that the reception of the idea is just amazing. People get things they couldn't see before. And you are kind of presenting it in such a personal way, where it's clear this has been an idea that has been with you for the last 30 years. When you started as an, I don't know, 10, 12, 14-year-old, it clicked very early for you, and your whole journey has been around that. So I just wanted to give you the word and also ask you, you have been there from the beginning of initiating this 4 weeks we had for the planning. You helped tremendously. You were there in all the sessions. How is it for you to now have this 1,000 people, sometimes 1,500? What is your takeaway? And then perhaps we can still have a few minutes of discussion with Johan also before we close down. So over to you, Sabine.
Thank you, Martin.
In English or Swedish for Johan, or in Deutsch.
No, I think I'll speak in English. Yeah, so it's wonderful. Like, I wouldn't have believed it. And honestly, like, if you hadn't pushed and all the others, I would have not gone that far, you know. Like, also this first talk, I was like, oh, I don't have time, I'm not ready. I was like, come go. and now, like, it's wonderful to see how many people are involved in this, and all the presentations today, so really see the rise of this epidemic in a way of positive change in the health field. And I got contacted also by a lot of interesting and enthusiastic people, and I want to apologize to all those I haven't responded yet. I will eventually write back. Yeah, it's really like coming together a lot of things now in my eyes, that I knew that this planetary health concept has a lot of traction, because I've noticed this from the beginning. So at first, like, I've kind of thought in this direction for really long before these terms were there, and I got really attracted by eco-health when I heard about it first, and then I realized, okay, planetary health is kind of a similar thing, coming more from the medical community, and I went to this planetary health conference in Edinburgh and made very interesting contacts there, very open-minded and transdisciplinary community, and really all the young people I talked to about this got it right away. And I think it's because of this, the symbolism that you've talked also about, the earth being an organism and being alive, right? But like in the Gaia theory, where you say there is self-regulatory mechanisms, and we can understand it maybe better if we think in terms of physiology than if we think in terms of this is a spaceship that we are sitting on or something, and understand sort of the water circles, the nutrient cycles, and all these feedback loops that we've been ignoring as humans. And we think there's like a huge, an endless amount of resources that we can dig out and then put in an endless hole where we put all the garbage, and this will work forevermore with growth and growth and growth in this material way. And to realize that, no, sorry, we're like part of a living system, of this living planet, and we're one organism in this whole symphony of life, and we are behaving in a very dangerous way for ourselves. In fact, it's backfiring on ourselves. And how can we become connected again to the rest of life on Earth? And I think this imagination challenge is quite important, and that's why the symbols and the sort of concepts are so important, and to kind of see things differently. Because if we it kind of means that if you look at something in a different way, you'll also behave in a different way. It drives your behavior, and having this positive visions of humans becoming a useful member of this planet. I think it's actually too little to ask that we should just be less harmful. Like, we should maybe think about how can we actually be useful like all the other organisms. And many humans are not as harmful. It's like just actually a smaller number that's doing most of the damage. And looking at this inequality of how many people are also suffering, and still, like, we haven't even managed to give human dignity to many, as Johan also mentioned. How can we regulate ourselves? And it's not, like, often you get this argument, yeah, but you can't go back to the past. No, we don't go back to the past. It's more like a spiral where we've kind of done a circle of becoming more independent from nature, but then we realize actually, but we need to connect again on another level, and we will not get rid, of course, of modern medicine and all the other technologies. We actually need them to become more consciously part of the Anthropocene, because we are in the Anthropocene. We can't change that anymore. We have now a responsibility, but to kind of go back and enter it on another level, basically. Yeah, and what I think is important, maybe also for people who got engaged, that it's so nice to see that people just start somewhere and in so many different places, and that they're still connected. And that's sort of the idea of this academy, that it wasn't just to give knowledge, because that we have that everywhere. We have the knowledge out there, and you can just put together some YouTube videos from cool people and watch them, and here it is. But the idea was that we'll actually connect through this, that will inspire people, and that they form these groups and do stuff, because that's the big gap, going from knowing to doing. And you put it as a subtitle, which I thought was very, very fitting, and it's worked. And now let's see what comes from this sort of seed that we've sown, and more people will get infected by the idea and do things. And I do think it's really important to have some creativity in this, some interesting things with art, with new ideas, and have fun, because it's not just about doing some technological fixes to the things. It's about having a different attitude, and realizing this connectedness of everybody with each other, and with other forms of life, and like the values that are important to live in such a way, and it gives meaning to people. That's what I feel, that a lot of people are actually longing for that. They've kind of found that we've lost, like in this sort of spiral forever, growing more and having more, and just faster and quicker and so on. We've kind of lost the most important things, that is like how we connect to others, how we connect to nature. And in medicine also, we know it. If people are very sick, they get some cancer diagnosis, they often realize it immediately what's important. Yeah, and why don't we realize it earlier, and do something that's really important to us, that people feel like very strongly about. And of course, you will not, there's no direct path to wherever people want to go, but it's like the star that guides us and that where we need to go. And then we'll take some rounded route and see like, how do we need to correct it again, how we connect with others to get there. But we know sort of where we're heading from our values and from what is important. And I think that kind of shines through in the attitude that we work here and with each other, and that's why it's so compelling to me as well, and gives me a lot of energy as well, because you need that. You need to work with others.
We all need that.
We're really committed, yeah.
Thank you very much, Sabine, and it's great to know that you will continue to be a partner of this journey. And I just want to add two things that I think are important for everyone. We had the pleasure to pretty much talk with all the lecturers who have been here. And I know from all of them, they are willing to continue to play with us because they feel that what we are doing is something extraordinary. And I've said it before, consider them as your team. We are doing it as one team because given what is at stake, we cannot do it through a hierarchy. We cannot do it through unique contributions. And Johan makes a unique contribution is at a unique space, but every one of you makes unique contribution at a unique space. So it's very, very important to see that all of this is available. Not everyone always has to talk to everyone else, but through the network, we're really connected and we're making this happen. The second thing is I have been looking back at two videos today, the one from Louise and Nick, and I just felt how strong the foundation is that we have in the material. A lot of them I go back to, and it's very rich. So we have a very good basis. And now I come to what I see is going to kind of come from the Planetary Health Academy, and jetzt mache ich es auf Deutsch weiter.
So for us, it is quite clear that this will continue. It's also clear that we'll keep having big lectures Germany-wide, but it's just as important that the local groups, the regional groups, continue their independent activity. And the goal is that in all universities this should become an integral part of the curriculum, also that the way of teaching changes. It's not just about the content, it's also about the type of the way of teaching. And I think we can give a lot of inspiration because it's about action, it's about transdisciplinarity, which is sadly lacking in most of the training schools, medicine schools in Germany. So the vision is that this should infect all these areas positively, and as we've just heard, we continue with the attitude that it's the right and necessity that all training institutions develop in this direction. It cannot be acceptable that an institution says, well, okay, but it will take 5 years. So because if something urgent happened, like COVID or climate, things must be possible to happen in the space of months, and we are willing to be innovative, and we want to continue to do so nationwide, and also the bridge to other professions. And the other feedback we got is at the global level there's nothing comparable, and therefore the question is how we can put the Planetary Health Alliance into a global network so that this part of teaching and training also has an international agenda. We'll have to see which steps to take and which steps to postpone, but I also know that many people in your universities are the big pillars. Unless we had these groups and these local groups, that would be great too, but it wouldn't be all. It would just be half-baked. It would only be half the story, and we are so enthusiastic that 30 groups have been created, that more Health for the Future groups are created, and that people are also trying to bring the idea forward using their own stories and their own ideas. So it's a kind of base camp now, and we'll make sure that we'll set up the next base camps at a higher level, and we can make excursion from there. It's not just a vision, it's a promise that we're going to keep our eyes on the ball there with you. And I would like to pass the floor finally to Sylvia, who is going to announce a few more things. And finally, I would like to pick up from the proposal from the beginning. We are going to celebrate, we're going to have a drink, and bring out a toast to the planetary health. You should regard yourselves as a change agent now. The biggest things don't have to be formalized, and of course you can do formal things at the end, but you don't have to, and we've done so in the last few months. So Sylvia, please. Well, the most important announcement has been made at the beginning. I just would like to say again that we should try experiments that should be hopeful and confident and inspired by this exercise, and start your own experiment. Be inspired by the examples we've heard about, and so give your personal handprint to the world. That's my end word, my final word. So thank you very much for participating, and enjoy the evening.